Lawsuit for more than $1.5 billion against the power company PacifiCorp. The key question, was the weather to blame for 4 disastrous and deadly fires during Labor Day of 2020? Or was it the sparking lines from PacifiCorp that created the firestorms? And is the company to blame because it did not turn the electricity off? That is our big story tonight. Those Labor Day fires of 2020 really, truly were awful. Dry, hot windstorms blew several different fires into infernos. They eventually killed 9 people in Oregon, destroyed thousands of homes, and burned more than 1 million acres. They were the most destructive in Oregon history. Well, now a class action lawsuit against the huge power company PacifiCorp is underway. The lawsuit covers 4 fires: the Echo Mountain Fire in Lincoln County, the South Obichain Fire in Jackson County, the 242 Fire in Klamath County, and the Santiam Canyon Fire. The plaintiffs are suing, arguing that PacifiCorp did not turn off its power lines and that some went down, sparked, and spread fires during the big storm. They want PacifiCorp to pay for the damages. And by the way, even if you were not impacted directly, you probably did live through that awful smoke that was created by the fires. It hung over the greater Portland area for days. And the aftermath of the fire is creating much more robust fire forecasting operations from all the utilities, and it's likely going to mean more power shutoffs before big hot storms in the future. In the meantime, let's get to opening arguments. First, for the folks suing. Here is attorney Nicholas Rosinia.
You'll learn that PacifiCorp knew that there was a forecasted east windstorm bearing down on Oregon in September of 2020. It knew the ground was dry, the humidity was low, and the conditions were ripe for fire. It received warning after warning after warning.
On the other side, PacifiCorp's defense lawyers said, hey, listen, there are 2 sides to every story, and that first guy left out a bunch of important facts. Here's defense attorney Doug Dixon.
There are no easy answers. And all the could have that you heard from plaintiff's counsel conveniently ignore these complexities and the role of others in this battle, including the role of state and federal governments when it comes to forest land management, including the rights of those who choose to live in rural areas among the trees, and including the numerous other companies and agencies involved in this battle.
This is a big trial. It's expected to last until mid-June. For those of you who are Pacific Power or PacifiCorp customers, you might be wondering, what's this all mean to you? If the company loses, do your rates go up? Well, we don't know for sure. Utilities are regulated by public utilities commissions, so they would need to ask permission to do that. But we're still looking into that whole big question, and we'll let you know what we learn as soon as we do. Yes, that means one thing. Time to talk about tolling for a moment. Earlier this month, we got a note from the president of the Vote Before Tolls initiative. That's the group that's trying to gather enough signatures to force a statewide vote on tolls. He told us that bills in the legislature that would stop tolling are not going to be moving forward. And as evidence, he pointed to Democratic Representative Susan McClain, who apparently said that as much as that at a meeting of the group Willamette Women Democrats this month. If she really did say that, that'd be kind of a big deal. McClain is the co-chair of the Joint Transportation Committee, and the 2 bills that would stop tolling are in her committee right now with no hearing scheduled. Well, we've done all kinds of tolling stories over the past few months, and the overwhelming majority of you are not in favor of tolling. And when we first told you about these anti-tolling bills, many of you were thrilled. So if they're effectively dead in the legislature, we figured, well, you should know about that. So we tried to track down what Rep. McClain said during that Willamette Women Democrats meeting. We found her PowerPoint presentation from the speech, but it did not mention the bills. And we could not find a recording, so we went straight to McClain herself. And before we get into parts of our interview, I want to share a message she sent us on email a few days before we hopped on Zoom regarding those tolling bills. She wrote to us, We've had a shortened meeting calendar for joint transportation this session because of weather and the need for longer floor sessions in both the House and the Senate. The tolling bills are with other bills that have not been heard yet because of the limited time. We have to consider how each bill fits into our overall transportation goals, how they add to the conversation on a specific piece of our current work, and how they fit into our session pathway. So, get that? That's the setup. And here's what she said when we asked her directly if those anti-tolling bills are dead.
Well, first of all, just to talk about the process is that all bills that are in joint committee have to be posted for a work session by May 5th of 2023. And so all bills that are in my committee are still alive, and we are reviewing them. We review every bill. We review bills for purpose, and we review bills for particular review of statutes and how they connect with other statutes. And we also review bills just to make sure that they have all of the things that they need to do the things that they're saying they want to do. So we're looking at them in a technical way. We're looking at them for content. And so all the bills that have until May 5th to be considered.
So I have to say, that was a very skillful pivot. Remember, our question was, is the bill dead? You know, not gonna move, not a chance in the world, done. And she answered instead with process, which is a very different thing. So I guess if we accept the pivot, the bills have until next Friday to get a work session, but really don't hold your breath. And remember what she said in her initial email about how they look at the bills and how they fit into the overall transportation goals? Well, okay, we went back with that question. We asked if tolling is part of those overall goals.
The goal is to continue to develop that as a tool and as a funding device that's part of the package of transportation funding in the state of Oregon. The goals that go along with that is a multimodal system. Safety is our number one concern in everything, and we want to make sure that we have the funding to be able to deal with many elements of the system we have.
Okay, good, yes. In other words, yes, tolling, we are for tolling. We are not for tolling, for bills that would stop tolling. Listen, tolling is a big part of the overall goals. So even though these anti-tolling bills are officially still alive, in my opinion, it's a safe bet to say they are very much dead. Wouldn't it be nice if the politicians just gave us a straight answer? Anyway, I think tolling is inevitable here in Oregon. I'm still on the fence about whether it's really necessary or not, but I know that if you are against the tolls, that Vote Before Tolls initiative is probably going to be the only way you'll be able to slam the brakes on any tolling plans. Now, to be fair, there are some, maybe even a lot of you out there, who don't have a problem with tolling, and you agree it's a user fee that should be implemented to help pay for ODOT's projects and maintenance. And one of the people who agree with you on that is the co-chair of the Powerful Ways and Means Committee, Senator Elizabeth Steiner. She feels that way about it too. In fact, she told me that on camera earlier this year. But we also see your emails and we hear your voicemails, and you are adamantly, many of you, against tolling. You call it another tax. You argue the lack of tolls is another way for Oregon to stay relatively unique from states that are already full of tolls. So, what would the representatives say to those of you?
First of all, I've spent a lot of time studying tolls, and it's one of those things where when we looked at other states that had had them for a while, there was a big sort of a push at the beginning to stop tolls. And then once the tolls were put in place in 38 states so far, and also other states that use them like bridge tolls, that there was almost an immediate change of behavior and a change of opinion, that they saw what they got for that particular price for a fee, and they felt that it was worth the time and effort to put it in and to use it, because they were getting to do some different types of travel, not as much congestion, be able to really navigate some of the different types of multimodal systems that folks were setting up. So I guess what I would say to that group that you just talked about is give it a chance. Remember, we're still talking. We're in the middle of a dialogue. There's going to be a lot of nuancing and a lot of tightening up in some areas, because we care about taking care of equity and diversion issues that may come from this type of a system. And we really want to do it right for each and every community.
So, What can we take away from this segment other than the rep is a fantastic pivoter? Well, it's that anti-tolling bills in the legislature pretty much dead, although not officially. Tolling is a serious revenue source in the future of ODOT budgets, already baked into decision making that's happening now. And a bit of optimism from Representative McLean, who says, come on, give tolling a chance. So, how are you feeling about all that? Did anything she said change your opinion, your perspective? What do you think? Let us know, will you? Send us an email. You know the address, but just in case, the address is thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail 503-226-5090. Coming up next on The Story, we'll take a break from the goings-on in Salem to check in on what happened in Olympia to the north. Lawmakers in Washington state ended their session this past Sunday with some big headlines, both good and bad. From an update on the assault weapon ban to the very real possibility that drug possession could actually be decriminalized, all because a bill did not pass. Lots to explain. We'll get into it when The Story returns. Oregon's legislature is still meeting, but Washington's, well, they've gone home. They were done this past Sunday. It was a busy couple of months in Olympia. Lawmakers put billions towards schooling, housing, and helping people experiencing homelessness, all without raising taxes. But there are two other things that we want to mention, big things, guns and drugs. There was movement on guns, but not on drugs. Let's take a look. Legislators have banned the sale, manufacture, and import of dozens of firearms they defined as assault weapons. The ban comes after years of failed attempts at similar legislation and makes Washington the 10th state in the nation to have such a ban. The bill does not ban the possession of assault weapons by folks who already own them. And there are exceptions when it comes to law enforcement, military service members, and inheriting an assault weapon that's already in the family. There is one small temporary loophole that you should also know about. The Washington Senate added an amendment that will allow gun manufacturers to sell guns that they had in the Washington state, assault weapons that they had in stock before this year, but they only have 90 days to sell those, and they have to sell them to people living outside the state of Washington. Today, Governor Jay Inslee signed the so-called assault weapons ban, taking aim at AR-15s in a speech just before he put that pen to paper.
These weapons of war, of assault weapons, have no reason other than mass murder. Their only purpose is to kill humans as rapidly as possible in large numbers. And I will say this, AR-15s should not be idolized, they should be prohibited, and that's what we're doing today.
Strong words, and moments after Inslee signed the bill, gun advocates followed through on their promise to take their strong words to court. The Bellevue Bay Second Amendment Foundation filed a lawsuit in federal court saying the new law violates the Second and 14th Amendments. In a statement, they say the state has criminalized a common and important means of self-defense, the modern semi-automatic rifle. The state has put politics ahead of constitutional rights and is penalizing law-abiding citizens, while this legislation does nothing to arrest and prosecute criminals who misuse firearms in defiance of all existing gun control laws. It is absurd. The group says they will take the suit all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court if it comes to that. They call the law legislative demagoguery. So, more to come on that in the next few weeks. Lawmakers in Olympia also tried to tackle drug possession in Washington state. The state Supreme Court threw out felony drug possession, that law that they had 2 years ago. And at that time, lawmakers made it a misdemeanor, but only on the third offense. That allows for a maximum sentence of 90 days in jail and or up to $1,000 in fines. But that law, it doesn't go forever. In fact, it expires in July. So something needed to be done this session. Yeah, the one that just ended, or else drugs would be decriminalized. For over 3 months, lawmakers went back and forth on how to move forward. And it seemed like they did have a compromise right up until they didn't. The deal failed in the final hour. The plan was to make drug possession a more serious gross misdemeanor, but with an emphasis on treatment rather than jail time. A gross misdemeanor carries a maximum jail sentence in Washington of 364 days in jail and or a $5,000 fine. But when it came time to vote Sunday in the House, the bill went down. Not a single Republican voted for it, with the GOP leader in that chamber saying this.
Although it was good that the criminal justice system had the gross misdemeanor available, there were so many off-ramps that wasn't really a credible threat.
Wilcox there also said the bill made it too hard for prosecutors to charge anyone, and local jurisdictions would be forced to have needle exchanges.
I'm not against a carefully managed needle exchange, but a local government should be able to control when, how, and if that happens. And I can't really understand why they were not willing to compromise on that issue.
Well, the Democratic Speaker of the House, Lori Jenkins, says she was shocked when no Republicans backed the bill, saying needle exchanges are a good way to get someone into treatment, and helping users is what the law should be about.
Arguing that what's most important is that somebody go to jail. No, I don't actually think that's what Washingtonians want. They want their friends and family members to get treatment and not suffer from this illness anymore and come out and be contributing members of society. The Republicans can say whatever they want about what their intentions are and things like that, but their vote last night is going to legalize the use of fentanyl and heroin everywhere in the state of Washington.
That doesn't sound so great. Well, they could look to Oregon and see how that works out. Again, illicit drug possession will be decriminalized on July 1st if nothing is agreed to. Lawmakers have gone home, but Governor Inslee does have the power to call them back for a special session. It's unclear if that's going to happen, though. Still to come, I'll take you back in time with a look at a report I did more than 30 years ago on Oregon's urban-rural divide. It's a chance to see how much things have changed and how much they have not. We'll watch that when the story returns.
Straight ahead at 6:30, a man shot and killed by police outside of a furniture store near Clackamas Town Center. We have new details. Plus a look at a plan to ban all gas-powered delivery vehicles from a big chunk of downtown Portland. And a major ruling in a lawsuit challenging the expansion of the Cascade-Siskiyou National Monument along the Oregon-California border that was years in the making. That's just ahead at 6:30. We hope to see you then.
The other day I was going through some old boxes under the stairs at home, and I found some stories that I did when I first arrived at KGW nearly 33 years ago. So we're going to take you back in time tonight for a theme in Oregon that has changed little over the decades. But first, let's remember what was going on back in 1990. Back then, computers were relatively new. Solitaire was being included in early computer programs to help users with their clicking and dragging skills. The minimum wage was $3.35 an hour in Oregon, and the Cincinnati Reds had won the World Series. George H.W. Bush was president, and Democrat Barbara Roberts was running to become the first woman governor in Oregon history. I covered that race. It was against Republican Dave Frohnmeyer. Spoiler alert, Roberts won. As part of that coverage, though, I went to Pendleton, where the two were going to hold a debate, and I reported on the urban-rural divide. We're going to show you that. We're doing it because it's a bit of context to the struggles that are underway now with things like the Greater Idaho movement. That feeling has really been around for a long time. You're going to notice that I was a lot younger then. You'll also notice the camera moves a little bit during the intro. I'm not sure what was going on with that. But anyway, here's a peek inside my personal vault.
We're at Blue Mountain Community College in Pendleton. The debate will be here in a couple of hours. And we're feeling a sense of excitement throughout the town here, especially with the poll coming out this morning. There's a real feeling I get that this is going to be a barn burner of a race, and that this debate tonight is going to be a good chance to see some of the new shots that will be fired over the next 4 weeks. But having said that, we must also say that we found an awful lot of people around here today who say that none of this matters, because way out here, their vote just doesn't count. At the Trails End Barbershop on Pendleton's Main Street.
So how are you today?
You can get a haircut for $7 and an earful of politics.
I think they're just trying to sway us to vote for their way. Once it's over, that's the last we see them for a while.
The man, when he's running for the job, he promises you, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do the other. If I'm elected, you elect him, and then he starts telling you, you are going to do this, you're going to do that, you're going to do the other.
We're not supposed to discuss politics, religion, or sex. That way we stay neutral.
But if you push, Connor and the others will tell you they feel left out and used.
I told you earlier I don't really have a political opinion because it really doesn't matter in the final outcome. You know what I'm saying? Because, I mean, they're not going to listen anyway, and they never have.
Well, I'm kind of glad they come here, but if I was a politician, you know, I wouldn't be working these little Mickey Mouse towns like Pendleton, Hermiston, Heppner, and that, when all your voting is done from Klamath Falls through Portland. Anybody can see that.
It seems to be that the...
Next door at the Rainbow Cafe, bartender Betty Adair has heard the same thing from her customers.
I think most people really don't feel that either one of the candidates or either of the four of the candidates are interested in what we're thinking here in Eastern Oregon. This is just a token visit, and I don't think people are really giving it that much thought.
Ah, yes, 30 years ago. As for the election, Barbara Roberts did win. So did the property tax limitation initiative called Ballot Measure 5. That was great for homeowners, but shifted school funding to the state. That created real challenging times for Governor Roberts and others back in 1990. And if you missed any of our Greater Idaho series highlighting the urban-rural divide nowadays, we have a full special report streaming right now on KGW+. That's our streaming app on Roku and Amazon Fire. And if you don't have one of those devices, you can always find our content on the KGW YouTube page. Just scroll down and look for The Story. Coming up next on The Story, we're not done with older footage just yet, but this time we're going back to the 60s. Well, 60 years anyway. The late Harry Belafonte was in town for a show back in 1963, and our crews caught up with him at the airport. How his words from decades past have chilling relevance today when The Story returns. Before we go tonight, we have a very cool piece of video to show you from 60 years ago that we dug up from our KGW vault. You've likely heard by now that Harry Belafonte, the singer, actor, and wide-ranging activist, died today. The cause was congestive heart failure. From music to the silver screen to using his fame to highlight civil rights issues and social causes, Belafonte never seemed to back away from his commitment to social justice. And we found a clip of him here in Portland at the airport in 1963 while he was in town for a show. 60 years later, many of his words are still quite poignant and relevant today.
Everybody's too busy telling me how many of their best friends are Negro and refusing to view how many of those that are not intimately associated with them that really do live under the most bestial kind of conditions. And I think in the Northwest, it may not be as intense or as complex as it is, for instance, in Mississippi or Birmingham or Georgia, but it nevertheless exists. And this is why I say it's the white community is always shocked when the Negro begins to protest the circumstance. You kind of say, well, gee, we thought everybody was happy. Well, how in the name of God and in the name of truth can anybody ask a man to be happy with 6 kids in the bedroom? You know, or the frustrations of not having 3 square meals a day. It's like, you know, it's like trying to look at an animal in the zoo. You know, we're not different. You know, we're just really not. The Negro has wisely come to a position of truth about his life. If my body has cancer, I don't want the doctor to treat me for a head cold, and I don't want the doctor to treat me for some other superficial ailment. I want to get to the source of the cancer. Sure, the Negro can keep his house a little cleaner, living in the ghetto. But that's not the problem. The problem is to get out of the ghetto. Sure, the Negro can stop carrying knives if he in fact does that, and a lot of us did. I did as a boy. I grew up in Harlem. I grew up in the Depression. I grew up in the 30s. My mother and father came home jobless. My mother was a domestic, my father was a chef. And he couldn't work. And when we went out into the streets, the only vent to our anger and to our pent-up emotions and frustration was destruction. And in a way, it psychologically soothed us a bit, because whenever we looked at the police, we saw the police not as a friend of our needs and as the great protector, we saw him as the defender of the status quo and the power structure. And since the law was part of keeping me in my ghetto, and it was designed to keep me in my ghetto, anything that I did that was in rebellion against the law was already for me a small victory. And I had nothing to lose. I didn't have anything to look forward to.
Harry Belafonte. He was 96 years old. And that's the end of our show. Thanks for watching. But remember, the story, our story, well, that never ends. I'll see you tomorrow.
This is KG.